Title: The Horrifying Encounters of Randonautica, A Journey into the Unknown. It was a hot summer day when Ellie, Jake, and Mia decided to try Randonautica for the first time. They had heard about the app's ability to lead people to strange and sometimes eerie locations. With nothing better to do, they set their intention on finding something mysterious. The app led them to the outskirts of town, to an old dirt road that none of them had ever seen before. The path seemed to lead nowhere, winding through thick woods that grew darker as they ventured deeper. Eventually, they reached the end of the road, where a crumbling, abandoned house stood. "Is this where it led us?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake, the bravest of the group, shrugged and started walking toward the house. Ellie hesitated, her gut telling her this was a bad idea, but curiosity won out. The house was in complete disrepair, with shattered windows and a door that hung loosely on its hinges. As they stepped inside, the smell of dampness and rot hit them like a wall. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time, but something about the place felt off. They wandered through the house, their footsteps echoing eerily in the empty rooms. Old furniture was covered in dust, and the walls were lined with peeling wallpaper. But it wasn't until they reached the basement door that the real terror began. The door was ajar, and from the darkness below, they could hear a faint, rhythmic tapping. Mia grabbed Jake's arm, her voice trembling. "Maybe we should leave." But Jake, ever the skeptic, brushed it off. "It's probably just a pipe or something." Without waiting for a response, he descended the creaky stairs into the basement. Ellie and Mia exchanged nervous glances before reluctantly following him down. The basement was cold, much colder than the rest of the house, and the air felt heavy. In the center of the room was an old wooden table, and on it was something strange, a small, dusty box. Jake approached the box, lifting the lid carefully. Inside was a stack of old photographs, but what they saw made their blood run cold. The photos were of them. Ellie, Jake, and Mia, captured at different moments throughout the day, completely unaware. Ellie's heart pounded as she flipped through the photos, each one more disturbing than the last. How is this possible?" Mia stammered, her face pale. Jake dropped the box, backing away in shock. "We need to get out of here. Now." Just as they turned to leave, the tapping sound returned, this time louder, faster. It was coming from the far corner of the basement, where shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. Without another word, they bolted up the stairs and out of the house, not daring to look back. As they raced down the road, Ellie could swear she saw a figure standing in the doorway, watching them. They never spoke about that day again, but none of them ever touched Randonautica after that. Aaron and his friends were always looking for a thrill, and when they heard about Randonautica, they were intrigued. They decided to use the app during one of their late-night drives, setting their intention to find something strange. The app guided them to a remote forest on the outskirts of their small town, a place none of them had ever explored before. "Let's see what this is all about," Aaron said as they parked the car and stepped into the thick woods. The trees were tall and densely packed, blocking out most of the moonlight. A sense of unease settled over them as they ventured deeper into the forest. After walking for what felt like hours, the app finally pinged. They had reached their destination. But instead of something strange or unusual, they found a small, empty clearing. Disappointed, Aaron sighed. Well, that was anticlimactic. Just as they were about to turn back, one of Aaron's friends noticed something odd. There were symbols etched into the ground, strange markings that none of them recognized. "They look like some kind of runes," one of them said, kneeling down for a closer look. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the forest, which had been filled with the sounds of nature moments ago, fell deathly silent. Aaron's skin prickled with fear as the shadows around them seemed to deepen. "We should leave," he muttered, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. But before they could move, they heard a voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it grew louder, more insistent. The voice was chanting something, words they couldn't understand, but that filled them with terror. Without thinking, they bolted, running through the forest as fast as they could. But no matter how far they ran, the chanting followed, growing louder, closer. Aaron's heart raced, his breath coming in ragged gasps as they stumbled through the darkness. Finally, they burst through the trees and into the open, collapsing beside the car. The chanting stopped, leaving only the sound of their heavy breathing and the wind rustling the leaves. They scrambled into the car and sped away, not daring to look back. Later, they researched the symbols they had seen in the clearing, and what they found chilled them to the bone. The markings were part of an ancient ritual, one used to summon malevolent spirits. They had stumbled upon something dark, something they were never meant to find. Aaron deleted Randonautica from his phone that night, vowing never to mess with the unknown again. Sarah, Max, and Olivia were bored one Saturday night and decided to try out Randonautica for fun. They had heard mixed stories about the app, some people found treasure, others found terror. Curiosity got the best of them, and they set their intention to find something spooky. The app led them to an old graveyard on the outskirts of town, one that had been abandoned for decades. The gate was rusty, the tombstones weathered and overgrown with weeds. "Great, just what we asked for," Max joked, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They pushed open the creaky gate and stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. As they wandered through the graveyard, a thick fog began to roll in, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. "I don't like this," Olivia whispered, clutching Sarah's arm. Max, always the prankster, darted ahead, disappearing into the fog. "Come on, Max, this isn't funny," Sarah called, her voice shaky. But there was no response, just the eerie silence of the graveyard. Suddenly, they heard Max scream. It wasn't his usual playful yell, it was a sound of pure terror. Sarah and Olivia ran toward the sound, their hearts pounding, but when they found Max, he was standing frozen, his face pale as a ghost. He pointed toward a nearby tombstone, his hand trembling. There, sitting on the grave, was a small doll. Its eyes were wide open, staring straight at them, and its mouth was twisted into a sinister grin. "That wasn't there before," Max whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her as the doll's head slowly turned toward them, as if it was alive. "Let's go," Olivia urged, pulling them away from the grave. But as they turned to leave, they heard something behind them, a low, raspy voice calling their names. They froze, fear gripping them as the voice repeated their names, one by one. They didn't wait to find out who, or what, was calling them. They ran, faster than they had ever run before, stumbling through the fog and over broken tombstones. When they reached the gate, they threw it open and fled into the night. But the voice followed them, growing louder and more distorted, until it finally faded into the distance. Back at home, they searched online for stories about the graveyard. What they found sent shivers down their spines. Decades ago, a young girl had been buried there with her favorite doll. Visitors to the graveyard often reported hearing voices and seeing the doll move on its own. Sarah, Max, and Olivia never used Randonautica again. And they never returned to that graveyard. Moral of the story: some mysteries are better left unexplored. When you seek the unknown, be prepared for what might find you instead. Curiosity can lead you to places where darkness lingers, and not every path is meant to be followed.